I just wanted to make a quick video about watering. I know that when I first started doing some serious food growing, watering was one of the most confusing things to me. How much do I water? When do I water? What do I water? Do different things need different amounts? All that type of stuff. So I'm going to make this pretty quick, but I just want to cover some of the basic things that I think would be really helpful if you're just getting started with a garden or a food forest or an orchard, or just a few edible plants on your landscape, or if you've been doing it a while but watering continues to vex you. A few really important things. The first thing, before you do anything else, is make sure you have some way on your property of being able to measure how much rainfall is falling. This does not have to be anything elaborate. You can get a simple rain gauge, costs a few bucks, at the hardware store or whatever. It's just a little tube with some measurements that show you how much it rained. You could be really simple like me. I leave out a bucket. This was how much it rained last night. And so I'm able to come out in the morning and just stare in my bucket and know that that is about a quarter to a half an inch. I just need a rough estimate, because you need to know how much the rain is contributing to the water that your plants are getting before you can know how much you need to water on top of that. If you're getting tons of rain, not only do you not need to water, it's a waste of water, but you could actually harm the plants by causing the soil to be extra moist, and the roots are just sitting in that moisture constantly and they will rot and die. So the next thing is to really understand what's expected in your area in terms of weather and climate. So if you live in Arizona, that's obviously very different from living in Hilo on the Big Island, Hilo being one of the rainiest cities in the country. And so just knowing that, you kind of have a general gist of what to expect from the rain amounts. It's never perfect. We've been in a drought here where we are in the Big Island for quite some time. And I have learned that even when the forecast says there's an 80 or 90% chance of rain and we're going to get a substantial amount of rain, it may not rain a single drop. Or right now, when it says it's 0% chance of rain and partly cloudy, and it's very cloudy and drizzling rain. So just kind of being aware of what to expect, but also knowing you have to constantly adjust and be dynamic with that. The next thing is to kind of have a rough estimate of how much water your plants need every week. For me, if my plants get 2 inches of rain a week, I don't water, unless it was all at once and then very hot and dry after that. But if they get 2 inches spread out through the week, something like that, I don't feel like I need to water at all. And that way I kind of look in the bucket. Here I've got a half an inch. That tells me like, yeah, I probably don't need to worry about watering for another couple days if it doesn't rain again. But over the next couple days, if it gets up to another half inch or so, I'm good for a little while. And so about 2 inches a week is kind of one of the standards for most food producing plants, crops, or fruits. Definitely a lot of the annual vegetables that people grow in their gardens, about 2 inches a week. That is very hard to kind of calculate when you have a hose or overhead sprinklers. You can calculate it a little bit better if you're using drip irrigation. So if you're thinking about drip irrigation but you don't yet have it, I would suggest to go and look at our video on setting up our drip irrigation. It's a good kind of just step-by-step of an easy drip irrigation system. It's not a huge cost. It will save you a lot of time. Even if you have a relatively small garden, it's a really smart way to water your plants because it's right down at the root zone and you're not getting water on the foliage all the time, which can cause all kinds of fungal and disease issues, that sort of thing. So go back and check out that drip irrigation if you're interested in that. But that can be easy to calculate because the emitters that drip the water from the hose lines, they are run to certain specified amounts. For example, you may buy ones where every little dripper emits a half a gallon per hour. And so you turn your system on for an hour and from that one little spot where it's dripping, that's going to contribute a half a gallon. Now, then you have to do a little bit extra math if you want to try to do some kind of conversion over like, well, how would that connect to rainfall amounts and inches and all that stuff. But essentially what I do is I do have half-gallon emitters. I keep them on for 1 hour, and I equate that to about 1 inch of rain. The same thing as if it were to rain about 1 inch. But all watering is not the same. It's not all made equal. The drip irrigation, because it's constantly dripping slowly in one spot, I mean, obviously several spots down the drip line, but each drip line is one spot. It's not splashing all over the place. That water is seeping down very deep in the soil in a kind of narrow silo. And then you have different amounts of space on those hoses. You can have an emitter every 6 inches, 8 inches, 12 inches, whatever. But you have to understand that water is going straight down. That's really good for promoting deep root growth on your plants. It's another thing that makes drip irrigation really good for watering. If you were to just go out there with the hose, most people say like, well, you simply want to give it a really good soaking. You don't want to do the spritz and forget, because that encourages very shallow root development and over time can contribute to having weaker plants. You really want to get a nice soaking, let that water really kind of fill up and soak down into the soil. But a good drenching at the soil level, not on the plant itself. And so with all those kinds of things in mind, I have a very similar technique with my fruit trees. Younger trees is going to be different than older trees though. So younger trees need a lot more water early on while their roots get established. After a few years, those roots are going pretty deep. They're spread far. They can really reach a lot of different water sources. Whereas when they're young, very shallow, very undeveloped roots. And so they're getting all the water usually from you coming and pampering them. But same kind of thing, soak them deeply once or twice a week, depending on the rain amounts that you're getting. And so this can be you can make it complicated, like most of us do, I think, when we're getting started and we get really confused and we don't know what's happening. But ultimately, in the end, all you really need to pay attention to is, how are your plants looking? You know, are they sad and wilty? Are they having stunted growth? And of course, that could be from some other issues, but if you have no reason to believe that it's a soil issue in terms of like nutrients or it's a disease, something like that, then water is your main culprit. If it's been hot and dry and your plants are wilting, that's the most obvious thing. So the main thing is to just keep an eye on your plants. You can also feel down in the soil. Stick your finger down in there, your hands down in the soil, see what's going on. Is there moisture down in there, or is it bone dry? And then that also is connected back to what kind of soil you got. If you have sand, you can water it all you like and come back an hour later and all the water's gone because it just goes right through the sand. If you've got clay, you can water it a tiny little bit, come back the next day and still see a puddle of water sitting there because it doesn't drain. So those types of things affect your watering strategy as well. I've mentioned it before on this channel. I'm sure you've heard this. Adding organic matter. You cannot go wrong with that because it soaks up any excess water, holds the water, makes it available to your plants when they need it, but doesn't contribute to like standing water down in the soil. So just either way, if you got sand or you got clay, add organic matter. It's going to improve your soil. It's going to improve your ability for your soil to hold water, which means you don't have to water as much. And then another thing I've mentioned on this channel before, make sure you mulch. You always want to cover your soils, build that mulch up deep as you can, whatever you have available, because that will also lock in the moisture as well. And then that will in turn affect how much you need to water. The more mulch you got, the less you're going to need to water. So it's just kind of a quick, boom, 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 1, 2, 3s, the ABCs of watering. Hopefully that's helpful for you. If you have any questions about any of that stuff, definitely throw something in the comments section. I'd be happy to answer any of those, or if you have any suggestions about any watering systems or ideas that work really well for you. But I hope that was helpful, and get out there, keep an eye on those plants, and we'll see you back here next time at Ina Bear Farm. Aloha.